The silence in the gilded ballroom was heavy, thicker than the buttercream frosting on the 6-tier cake towering behind me. 500 guests sat in suspended animation, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths. My sister, Brittany, looked smug in her $50,000 custom silk dress, sitting next to her new husband, Julian. My mother, Patricia, beamed with intoxicating pride from the head table, looking out at a room she couldn't afford. The DJ had just handed me the microphone for the Maid of Honor toast. My hand didn't shake. I was past being nervous. I was just done. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was cold, sharp, and dangerous. "They say you can't put a price on love," I said into the mic, my voice echoing off the marble walls and crystal chandeliers. But my mother managed to find one. Apparently, the price tag for Brittany's dream wedding was exactly $25,000. My name is Calla. I'm 23 years old, a nursing student who survives on instant coffee, overtime shifts, and sheer grit. I've spent my whole life being the backup plan to my sister, the family's golden child. But today I wasn't the backup. I was the reckoning. I reached into the bodice of my champagne-colored bridesmaid dress and pulled out a thick, blood-red envelope. A murmur went through the crowd like a wave. Patricia's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing in confusion. I ripped the envelope open, pulled out a single, framed document, glass gleaming under the spotlights, and slammed it down hard onto the cake table. Frosting splattered onto the expensive silk tablecloth. "Here is the bill," I announced, staring straight at my mother, whose face had gone pale. "I'm done paying for this family. Happy wedding day." 6 months before I ruined my sister's wedding, I was standing in a sterile bank lobby, feeling sick. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was excited because it was finally time to withdraw the tuition money for my final year of nursing school. My grandmother had left me a specific education trust fund, explicitly designed to unlock full access on the day I turned 23. It was supposed to have $25,000 in it, enough to finish my degree debt-free. I handed my ID to the teller, a kind woman named Brenda with reading glasses perched on her nose. She typed on her keyboard, stopped, frowned, and typed again. Then she looked at me with pure, heartbreaking pity in her eyes. "Honey," she said quietly, sliding a piece of paper across the counter, "the current available balance is $12.45. The room spun. My knees felt weak. "That's impossible," I whispered, gripping the cold counter. "Nobody has access but me. I just turned 23 yesterday." Brenda turned the monitor so I could see the transaction history. "Your mother, Patricia, was listed as the managing trustee until your 23rd birthday. Records show she liquidated the entire account via cashier's check 3 days ago, just 48 hours before her access was set to expire." It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The air left the room. I didn't cry. I just felt a hot, blinding rage take over my body, creating a tunnel vision focused entirely on revenge. I walked out of the bank into the rain, got into my beat-up sedan, and drove straight to my mother's house. Her driveway was jammed with delivery vans unloading hundreds of pale pink roses, expensive samples for Brittany's centerpieces. I stormed through the front door without knocking, the wet rain still dripping from my coat. Patricia was sitting at the marble kitchen island, sipping an expensive Chardonnay and flipping through a leather-bound book of fabric swatches. She looked up, annoyed by the interruption, as if I were a solicitor. "Where is my money?" I screamed, slamming my car keys on the granite counter. "Did you steal my entire tuition fund?" Patricia didn't even blink. She just took another calm sip of wine. "Don't be dramatic, Calla. I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. Brittany needed the venue deposit right now to secure the date. You know how competitive the gilded ballroom is. If we didn't pay the 25 grand immediately, they were going to give the date to someone else." My jaw dropped. The entitlement was suffocating. "You gave my education money to Brittany for a party deposit?" It's her dream day, Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. You're smart. You can get a scholarship or just take out one of those student loans. Don't be selfish, Kella. This is for your sister's happiness. You can delay your school for a year. I stood there shaking. She truly didn't think she had done anything wrong. She saw me as a resource to be harvested for Brittany. How are you going to pay me back? I demanded, my voice trembling. She laughed, a light, tinkling sound. Oh, stop worrying. Julian's parents are wealthy. The cash gifts from the wedding guests will be huge. We'll pay you back from the gift box money after the honeymoon. Now go home, you're ruining my vibe. I was kicked out with nothing but empty promises and a broken heart. The next week was a nightmare of bureaucracy and panic. The financial aid office at my school was useless. Because it was so late in the semester, the deadlines for all the merit-based scholarships had passed. To stay enrolled and finish my degree, I had no choice but to take out a predatory, private student loan with an interest rate that made me want to vomit. I sat at my kitchen table, calculating the monthly interest payments. I couldn't afford them on my part-time hospital wages. I needed real money, and I needed it fast. Desperate, I applied for a job at Howie Events, the city's premier luxury wedding planning firm. They managed the most exclusive venues in the city, including the Gilded Ballroom. I knew they paid high commissions for their coordinators. During the interview, the owner, Mrs. Howie, a terrifyingly sharp woman in a tailored suit, watched me reorganize a chaotic catering schedule in 3 minutes flat. You're hired, she said, raising an eyebrow. You've got nerves of steel and an eye for detail. You'll need them in this industry. My first day, Mrs. Howie dropped a heavy manila folder onto my desk. Welcome to the big leagues, Kella. This is a nightmare client. High budget, low class, and impossible demands. My senior planners refuse to work with this woman, but you seem hungry enough to handle a bridezilla of this magnitude. I opened the folder. The names on the contract made my blood run cold. Bride, Brittany. Mother of the bride, Patricia. Fate has a sick sense of humor. I was now officially hired to plan the wedding that was paid for with my stolen money. I initially tried to tell Mrs. Howie I couldn't take the client due to a conflict of interest, but I desperately needed the commission check to service my new debt. I swallowed my pride and walked into the plush conference room a few days later. Patricia and Brittany were already sitting there, laughing about appetizer options. When I walked in, wearing my professional black blazer and holding a tablet, they froze. Patricia recovered first. She let out a loud, barking laugh. Oh, good Lord. You're working here? Did you come to beg for gas money? She turned to Brittany. Maybe your sister can finally be useful and get us a family discount. I felt the familiar sting of humiliation, but I pushed it down. I wasn't their daughter or sister right now. I was an employee of Howie Events, and I had a job to do. I am the event coordinator assigned to your file, I said, my voice flat and professional. I see you've paid the venue rental deposit directly to the accounts department, but you haven't signed the coordination services agreement yet. I cannot book vendors, manage the timeline, or secure the catering until this contract is signed. I slid the iPad across the polished wood table toward them. They signed it without reading the fine print. They didn't notice that I had specifically highlighted the clauses regarding strict late payment penalties and vendor rights to cancel for non-payment in bold digital ink. They thought they owned me. In reality, they had just signed their own warrant. The trap was set. The next meeting introduced the variable that would eventually become my mother's undoing. The Hawthorns. Julian, the groom, was a sweet guy with kind eyes, but he had zero backbone. His parents, however, were terrifyingly proper. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne were old money, the kind of people who wore cashmere sweaters in July, drove vintage Volvos, and believed debt was a moral failing. We were at a menu tasting in the venue's private dining room. Patricia was putting on a performance worthy of an Oscar. We want the lobster tails and the filet mignon, Patricia announced, swirling her wine glass. I've been saving for this day since Brittany was born. Only the best for my baby girl. I stood in the corner, clutching my clipboard so hard my knuckles turned white. She was talking about my money. The money meant for my anatomy textbooks and clinical rotations was paying for those lobster tails. Mr. Hawthorne nodded approvingly, slicing into his steak. It is refreshing to see a family that plans finances so responsibly. We despise living beyond one's means. Financial integrity is paramount to the Hawthorne name. Patricia didn't even flinch at the irony. Later, while Brittany was critiquing the mango sorbet, Julian caught my eye. He leaned in, whispering, "Your mom is so generous to do this. I know it's awkward with you working here, but you're lucky to have her." I almost vomited right there on the expensive carpet. I looked at his earnest, clueless face and felt a dark resolve harden in my chest. Just wait and see, I thought. You have no idea what you just married into. 2 months into the planning, I was barely sleeping. Brittany had turned into a monster. She didn't treat me like a sister. She treated me like a servant she could abuse because we shared DNA. She called me at 3 a.m. demanding to change the napkin colors from ivory to cream, screaming until I agreed to call the linen company. The breaking point happened in the design showroom. Brittany tripped over her own heels and spilled red wine on a pristine white carpet sample. Instead of apologizing, she pointed a manicured finger at me. "Calla bumped me," she lied, her voice shrill and accusatory. "Clean it up, Calla. You're the hired help, aren't you?" I got on my knees and scrubbed the stain while the Howie staff watched in horror. My mother just checked her phone, ignoring the degradation. Later, Mrs. Howie called me into her glass-walled office. I thought I was fired. Instead, she looked at me with confusion and concern. "I checked your personnel file. I know they are your family. Why are you letting them treat you like a slave? You don't have to take this abuse." I looked Mrs. Howie in the eye. I couldn't tell her the full plan yet. "I need the commission," I said calmly, "and I'm waiting for the final check to clear." I wasn't talking about my paycheck. I was talking about justice. As the date approached, the budget wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. Brittany decided she needed a custom ice sculpture of their monogram, a sushi station, and a 12-piece live orchestra instead of a DJ. The cost was astronomical. "We are $10,000 over the limit," I told Patricia during a budget review. "The initial deposit, the trust fund money, is already used up. We need another deposit to secure the orchestra." Patricia slammed her hand on the table, rattling the samples. "Just book it, Calla. Put it on the tab." "There is no tab," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Vendors need deposits. They won't show up without 50% down. Julian's parents are giving them a massive cash gift on the wedding night." Patricia snapped, her facade cracking. "We will pay the balances with that money. Just stall the vendors until the wedding is over. Do your job and make it happen." I slid my hand into my pocket and pressed stop on my phone's voice recorder. I had it. The admission. She had no money left, and she was planning to use the Hawthorne's gift to cover her debts retroactively. This recording was the first bullet in my gun. While Brittany was debating between orchids and peonies, I was living a very different reality. My first student loan statement arrived in the mail that week. The number at the bottom of the page made me nauseous. The interest alone was more than my weekly grocery budget. It was a tangible representation of how they had mortgaged my future for a single night of partying. I was eating instant noodles for dinner every night while planning a reception where the plates cost $500 a head. The injustice was eating me alive. Desperate, I went to my mother's house one last time. "Mom," I asked, standing in the foyer, "I need $200 for nursing textbooks. I can't register for my clinicals without them." Patricia laughed, as she adjusted a floral arrangement. "I can't, Calla. The florist needs cash for the bridal shower centerpieces. Don't be jealous just because it's Brittany's turn. You can pick up an extra shift if you need money. I walked out without a word. I drove home, took the loan statement, specifically the page showing the total cost of loan over 10 years, and went to a craft store. I bought a beautiful, heavy silver frame and expensive wedding wrapping paper. I framed the bill, smoothing out the edges. It looked like a diploma. It was going to be the most expensive gift at the reception, in more ways than one. The plan was now locked in. The cracks in Patricia's scheme began to show 2 weeks later. The second installment for the venue rental was due, and Patricia hadn't paid it. She was stalling. She was dodging Mrs. Howie's calls. It was time to plant the seed of destruction. I found Mr. Hawthorne at the venue for a final walkthrough. He was admiring the crystal chandeliers. I approached him, putting on my best stressed employee face. "Mr. Hawthorne," I said politely, "I just wanted to confirm the guest count for the orchestra. We are technically still on hold because we're waiting on the final payment from my mother to secure them. If the funds don't clear by Friday, we might have to cut the music." Mr. Hawthorne frowned, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. "Excuse me? Patricia told us the wedding was fully funded months ago. She said the accounts were settled and she was just handling extras." "Oh," I said, feigning shock. "Maybe there's a banking error. But Howie Events hasn't received the funds for the major vendors yet." I watched the doubt creep into his eyes. He thanked me stiffly and walked away to make a phone call. The first domino had just been tipped over. The final dress fitting was the moment my last shred of empathy died. Brittany had gained weight from stress eating, but refused to size up her custom silk gown. She forced the zipper up, and with a sickening rip, the delicate fabric split down the back. Brittany screamed, "Fix it! Fix it now! You're useless if you can't fix this." The seamstress was gone for the day. It was just us. I fell to my knees with a needle and thread, my hands trembling. I wasn't just a wedding planner. I was a nursing student with steady hands. I pulled the silk together, stitching furiously while Brittany berated me. "You better not ruin this, Kella. You're lucky Mom even let you be in the wedding after how greedy you've been." I worked so fast that I pricked my index finger deep. A drop of bright red blood welled up. I pulled my hand away quickly to avoid the dress. Brittany didn't ask if I was okay. She glared at me. "Don't bleed on the silk. Do you have any idea how much this costs?" I looked at the blood on my finger. I looked at my sister, who cared more about a dress than my pain. The sadness I had been carrying evaporated, replaced by cold, hard determination. I finished the stitch, tied the knot, and stood up. "It's fixed," I said flatly. The timeline for her destruction was now non-negotiable. 2 weeks before the wedding, the financial bomb finally went off. Patricia came to the Howie Events office to pay the remaining venue balance. She handed me a personal check with a flourish, acting like she was doing me a favor. "There," she said, "paid in full. Now stop hounding me." As soon as she left, I ran the check through our digital processing system. I waited, watching the spinning wheel on the screen. A moment later, a red box popped up. Insufficient funds. Transaction declined. She didn't have the money. She never had it. I didn't call Patricia. Instead, I printed the bounce check notification and walked into Mrs. Howie's office. I placed the paper on her desk. Mrs. Howie looked at it, then at me. Her eyes narrowed. "Kalla, we have to cancel the event. This is a breach of contract. I can't risk $50,000 of inventory on a bounce check." "If we cancel now," I said calmly, "Mrs. Howie, you lose the agency fee and I lose my commission. Let the show go on." "It's too much risk, Kalla," she countered, reaching for the phone. "I can't operate on a hunch that they'll pay." "It's not a hunch," I said, pulling out my phone. "Listen to this." I scrolled to the voice memo I had secretly recorded during the budget crisis months ago and hit play. Patricia's voice filled the room. admitting the trust fund was gone and explicitly stating her plan to use the Hawthorns' cash gifts to pay the bills retroactively. Mrs. Howie listened, her face hardening into stone. She's planning to defraud us and the groom's family. Exactly, I said. Let me trap her. Mr. Hawthorne is a man of extreme pride. If we reveal the fraud, he will pay the bill to avoid a public scandal. I guarantee it. We will get paid, but we have to let her walk into the trap. Mrs. Howie nodded slowly. This is personal for you, isn't it? It's justice, I replied. Let me handle it. Mrs. Howie agreed to let the wedding proceed. But I needed to keep Patricia in the trap. I called my mother. Mom, the bank system is glitching with personal checks. It didn't go through. Mrs. Howie says it's fine. Just bring a cashier's check or cash on the morning of the wedding. There was a pause on the line. I could hear Patricia's panic. She didn't have a cashier's check. She didn't have cash. But because I offered her a loophole, a glitch, she thought she was safe. Oh, silly technology, she laughed nervously. Sure, honey. I'll bring it on the big day. I hung up, knowing exactly what she was thinking. She was banking on the wedding gift box. Her plan was to open the guests' cards during the reception, take the cash gifts meant for Brittany and Julian, and use that stolen money to pay the vendors before anyone noticed. She thought she was a genius. She didn't know that I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom and the lockbox. The ultimatum was set. She would walk into the reception thinking she had an escape route. I was going to seal the exits. The rehearsal dinner was hosted by the Hawthorns at an upscale bistro. Unlike my mother's chaotic planning, this event was elegant, understated, and fully paid for. Patricia sat at the head of the table, drinking expensive champagne she didn't buy, acting like the Queen of England. She stood up to give a toast. I have given everything for my girls, she said, wiping away a fake tear. A mother's sacrifice is never finished. I just want Brittany to have the world. The room applauded. I gripped the stem of my wine glass so hard I thought it would shatter in my hand. The audacity was suffocating. She was practically bragging about the theft. As dinner wound down, Mr. Hawthorne cornered me near the coat check. He looked worried. The seed of doubt I had planted was growing. Calla, he said quietly, is everything in order financially? I don't want any surprises tomorrow. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell him the whole truth yet. Mr. Hawthorne, you will see the full accounting of this wedding tomorrow night. I promise you, everything will be made clear. He nodded, seeming reassured. He had no idea that made clear meant his family was about to walk out on his son's wedding. The morning of the wedding was pure chaos. The bridal suite smelled like hairspray and nervous sweat. Brittany was screaming at the makeup artist because her eyeliner wasn't sharp enough. I was steaming the bridesmaid dresses, running on caffeine and adrenaline. Patricia bustled in, wearing a robe that said Mother of the Bride in rhinestones. She looked frantic beneath her makeup. She made a beeline for me. Calla, she whispered, pulling me aside. Did you bring the key for the gift table lockbox? I need to hold on to it. This was it. She needed access to the box immediately to steal the cash gifts and pay Mrs. Howie before the night ended. I smiled, patting the pocket of my blazer. The cool metal of the key pressed against my hip. Don't worry, Mom. I'm handling all the finances today. It's safer with the coordinator. No, give it to me, she hissed, her eyes darting around. I'm the mother. I should watch it. I can't, I said loud enough for the hairstylist to hear. Mrs. Howie's policy. Vendors only. We can't have family members liable for the cash. Patricia turned red, but she couldn't make a scene now without looking suspicious. She backed off, forcing a smile. Fine. Just make sure it's safe. Oh, it's very safe, I promised. She walked away, unaware that her lifeline had just been cut. The trap was locked. The ceremony was a masterpiece of deception. The aisle was lined with thousands of white hydrangeas, creating a tunnel of fragrant, expensive snow. As the Maid of Honor I walked ahead of Brittany. I kept my head high, but my stomach was churning. I reached the altar and stood next to Julian. He looked handsome and nervous, wiping sweat from his brow. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. Julian was spineless, yes, but he wasn't malicious. He was just another victim of Patricia's manipulation, believing he was marrying into a stable, loving family. Then the music swelled. Brittany walked down the aisle, looking like a princess in the dress I had bled to fix. Patricia wiped tears in the front row. To the casual observer, it was perfect. To me, every flower and every ribbon looked like my stolen future. I thought about the nights I sat in the dark because I couldn't afford electricity while they burned my tuition on this fantasy. As the couple exchanged rings, I glanced toward the back of the room. Mrs. Howie was standing in the shadows near the exit. She caught my eye and tapped her watch, then gave a singular, grim nod. The deadline was set. If the balance wasn't settled by 8 p.m. during the speeches, the police would be called for theft of services. The clock was ticking. The reception kicked off with a roar of energy. Waiters circled with champagne trays, and the band, the one Patricia couldn't afford, struck up a jazz number. Patricia was in her element, flitting between tables, accepting compliments, and downing glass after glass of wine. She was drunk on power, believing she had pulled off the crime of the century. 30 minutes in, she cornered me near the kitchen doors. Her eyes were manic. "Calla," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Give me the key to the card box. Now, I need to organize the gifts before we cut the cake." I pulled my arm away. "Not yet, Mom. It's tradition to wait until after the speeches. We don't want the guests to think we're greedy, do we?" "I don't care about tradition," she snapped, her voice rising. "I need that cash now." "Why?" I asked innocently, feigning confusion. "The wedding is paid for, right? You brought the cash for the glitch, remember?" She glared at me with pure hatred, trapped by her own lie. She couldn't admit she needed the guests' money to pay the venue without exposing her fraud. "Just give it to me after the toast," she spat, storming off. The lights dimmed. The DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the Maid of Honor toast." The room went quiet. I picked up the microphone. It was time. I stood at the head table, the microphone heavy in my hand. This brought us back to the moment the story began. The silence was absolute. The air conditioning hummed, but the tension was louder. "They say you can't put a price on love," I started, the words tasting like cold steel in my mouth. But my mother managed to. "It cost exactly $25,000. I saw confusion ripple through the crowd. Patricia's smile froze. She put her wine glass down slowly. 6 months ago, my mother drained my entire nursing school trust fund, money left me by our grandmother, to pay for the deposit on this room. Gasps erupted from the tables. I saw Mr. Hawthorne stiffen, his eyes darting to Patricia. She told me to take out loans. She told me my education didn't matter as much as Brittany's aesthetic. I reached into my dress and pulled out the red envelope. I ripped it open and slammed the framed document onto the table, right next to the wedding cake. "So here is the bill," I announced, pointing at the framed student loan statement. "I'm gifting you my debt. Since you spent my money on this party, you can pay it back. Happy wedding day." Patricia stood up, her face purple with rage. "Cut her mic. She's lying. She's jealous," she screamed, lunging toward the DJ booth. But I wasn't finished. I held the microphone tight. "And one more thing," I said, my voice cutting through her screams. "The debt isn't the only thing she didn't pay." I turned directly to the Hawthorne table. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne were staring at me, pale and horrified. "Mr. Hawthorne," I said, keeping my tone professional, "the venue has not been paid. The check my mother wrote 2 weeks ago bounced. She has zero intention of paying Howie Events." I pointed at the locked card box on the gift table. "Her plan was to take that box, open your generous cards, and use your gift money to pay the vendors tonight before you found out she is bankrupt." On cue, Mrs. Howie stepped into the light, flanked by 2 uniformed security guards. "She is correct," Mrs. Howie announced, her voice authoritative. "We have evidence of premeditated fraud. We require payment in full immediately, or the police will be called to arrest Mrs. Patricia." Julian stood up slowly. He looked at Brittany, then down at his hands. "You knew?" Julian asked, his voice shaking. "You knew she stole Calla's money?" Brittany didn't answer. She just sobbed, mascara running down her face. That was answer enough. Mr. Hawthorne stood up. He walked over to the gift table, picked up the heavy, locked card box and tucked it under his arm. He looked at Patricia with disgust. "Come, Julian. We are leaving." Julian pulled his hand away from Brittany's, stood up, and followed his father without looking back. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The wedding dissolved instantly. Guests whispered and hurried to the exits, leaving half-eaten meals behind. The band packed up in silence. Patricia was detained in the manager's office until she agreed to sign over the title of her luxury car and liquidate her remaining assets to cover the venue bill and avoid jail time. She left the building in a taxi, humiliated and broke. Julian filed for an annulment 3 days later, citing fraud in the inducement. He returned all the gifts to the guests with apology notes. Brittany moved back in with Patricia, and from what I heard, their house is a war zone of blame and misery. A week later, I sat in Mrs. Howie's glass office. The sun was shining. She slid a check across the desk. It was my commission, plus a substantial performance bonus. It wasn't the full $25,000, but it was enough to knock out a huge chunk of the loan. "You have a future here, Calla," Mrs. Howie said. "You've been promoted to senior planner. No more assistants." I signed the paperwork, feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't get my trust fund back, but I got my life back. And watching my mother try to explain to the police why she was trying to rob a wedding card box, that was priceless.